Producer and engineer William Wittman was one of our early guests in 2017 with a two-parter, episodes 15 and 16, where he discussed making seminal records with Cindy Lauper, Joan Osborne, and the Outfield, his time coming up through New York City recording studios, and his work-prank relationship with our very own John Agnello. I would encourage everyone to go check them out. They are very funny and super informative. In this episode, I catch up with Bill about making records with his band Too Much Joy, the things we like about in-the-box mixing, and working at the famed Van Gelder studio in Englewood, New Jersey. Stick around at the end of the episode for a special Gear Club exclusive Eventide promotion.
I tried to make some notes because I'm always terrible. People are always like, well, what are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know, same stuff. It's weird. I don't keep track generally. It's just sort of one thing after another happens,
I know what you mean. It's the deer in the headlights of what have you been up to recently. Maybe a good place to start is I just listened to your two episodes, which were in 2017.
Long time, yeah.
The things that always stick out to me, it's never about like the gear studio stuff. It's the like ethos stuff. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that got me was in your second episode, you talked about how sometimes people and in production, they miss the point. They're looking for what's wrong in a take. Right? You go, well, what is that in tune or was that in time? And really, like your thing in that episode was you got to be looking for what's magical, because if you look for what's wrong, you end up with a take without any mistakes. And
so what? Yeah.
Who gives a shit? That's not necessarily good.
It's funny. I write about that a lot. I write for and do the podcasts also for Production Expert, formerly Pro Tools Expert. Yeah. And I talk about that a lot, that at least first, you want to look for what's magical. You want to look for what's exciting or doing what it's supposed to do, which I always say, does it make you dance? Does it make you sing along? Does it make you laugh or cry or whatever it's supposed to do? Once you have that take and you go, oh, but wait, there's a mistake at bar 35, that's okay to fix stuff.
Sure.
But if you start with, well, what's wrong? It drives me crazy. There are certain artists, certain band members sometimes who the first thing when they walk in the control room is, well, what's wrong? That's silly, because you're fixing a take that's probably not the take anyway. Like, start with, is it exciting? Is it getting me off? Is it great? And then fix stuff. Well,
and also it's a vibe killer to go, well, is there anything messed up about this? Let's scrutinize it. Instead of going, well, 80% of that was amazing. And 20% of it wasn't amazing, but 80% of it was, like, you're right, very, like, that doesn't happen as much as it should in a recording studio.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, in my experience, the mark of a good producer is the guy who says, I don't care about that mistake. That sounds amazing. Or that track feels great. Who cares that the drummer missed a beat there or clicked a stick or whatever? It's like, so what? I keep saying the absence of errors is not what makes something great. Great's just great because it has an emotional connection to people, not because you didn't make mistakes.
And that's the magic, right?
Exactly.
Recording people in a room together in a way that makes somebody else feel something.
And it's the goal, right? I mean, it's supposed to be, we're making music to communicate to people, not just to say, look how perfect the computer made everything.
Right. So what have you been up to? What's been fun? Are you mixing a lot? Are you recording a lot? Are you...
We're continuing to do Too Much Joy writing and talking about, as I said, what should be the next record. And in the meantime, I'm doing a couple of things. I am mixing a bunch of different records at home, which is nice. It's nice to be able to work from home. And I was doing an interesting thing, kind of done with it now, but somebody asked me to score and mix a podcast that was kind of music-based, like stories from the music business. Mm-hmm. And so it was not exactly sound-alikes, but hint at the nature of the artist under discussion, so that you got a feeling of it being about the Rolling Stones or a feeling of it being about Prince or whatever. And so it was kind of fun to write Prince tracks or write Rolling Stones tracks or whatever it was, and also edit the podcast, which is something I hadn't really done before, which was kind of fun to have the challenge of just, it's old hat to you, but
sure is.
The other thing I did, I guess it's a while ago now, my sense of time is very poor. I always say, I know things happen before Sgt. Pepper or after Sgt. Pepper. This one's after. A year or two ago, because I guess it was still pretty much mid-pandemic, I did an interesting session. They asked me to do string and horns and woodwind overdubs on a Weezer record. It's called OK Human. It was their very, very Beatlesque, so very, very orchestrated. And we did all the strings and horns and woodwinds at the Van Gelder studio in New Jersey, which was interesting in its own right because, kind of in jazz world, legendary place and a really interesting room. And at least my understanding is I'm the only out of the family outside engineer who's ever been allowed to work in there, to be hands-on and be the engineer.
Did you decide to work there, or did Weezer say, we're working at this place, come do it?
Weezer and their producer had a connection to Perry Margolef. They were working, I guess, at his studio, or not his studio, but the studio he had helped put together for a publishing company in L.A. And so that was the connection to Perry. And then Perry, coincidentally in time, was helping get the Van Gelder studios sort of back together in a way that maybe they could do something there. Yeah. And so he put it together and said, hey, if you guys want to do something on the East Coast, well, there's the studio, Van Gelder. It would be real. I could probably make that happen.
Very cool.
And this is who you should probably use.
So how is the studio?
The room itself sounds really good, really interesting. It's hard to describe. It is a kind of a terracotta tile floor, like a hard tile floor.
Okay.
And cinder block up to pretty high, and then has a big vaulted or pyramidal ceiling. So it's tall and hard everywhere.
Uh-huh.
So it's live in a kind of an Abbey Road Studio 2 way. It's not echoey, but it's very, very alive. And so that kind of thing, strings and horns and that stuff sounded really good because they sound big and open, but at the same time controlled, not sort of concert hall splashy.
Yeah.
So it was perfect for that. I don't know that I'd want to do a rock band in there, but it might be interesting. I'm not sure how amenable they'd be.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I think they were a little shocked even at just hearing this relatively acoustic-y Weezer coming out of the speakers. They were like, well, this is not something Rudy would do.
Right. So. Well, very cool. And the strings and everything, all the orchestral stuff on that sounds fabulous.
Yeah, I think that record came out really interesting for them and really great. I love some of the songs on that. I think are some of his best in a long, long time.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about the Too Much Joy stuff, because when you mention it in your interview a little bit, you kind of got it to the point where it was you were producing the band and then you were in the band, and then you guys kind of took a hiatus starting in like 2009, 2010.
Might have even been 7, but somewhere in that area, yeah.
So then the band was kind of asleep for like over 10 years.
Yeah.
And then
I don't know if you heard about it, but there was this thing called the COVID pandemic.
Is that what did it?
Yeah, and I think all of us were a little going stir crazy, and one band member talked to another, and it just sort of spiraled and said, oh, I have this idea, what about that? And all of a sudden we were working together again remotely, and it just sort of happened without anybody saying, hey, let's make a record. We just started to make a record.
Are you guys all local?
No. 3 of us are in New York. One of us is in L.A., and one of us is in Oakland, the Bay Area.
Okay. Yeah, because I think the first time I actually met the whole band was the last session we did at Hobo.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if that's true that there was only one, right, where we had Jay, the LA guitar player.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, very little of this was everybody in the same room. That might have been the only time everybody was in the same room until we played a couple of shows back a couple of months ago. But yeah, it was all done one way or another remotely, whether it was a few of us together or just one person at a time, which drives me crazy a little bit trying to make a record like that. But I'm sure that there are an awful lot of people listening who do make records like that, especially now.
But so for Mistakes Were Made, you did that, but even All These Fucking Feelings, it
Most
was still...
of it because of the logistics more than the pandemic, but yeah, that's right.
And that, I mean, I know it's not the preference, but was it okay for you? Did you enjoy the process at all, or was it just a drag?
Well, I enjoy making music with those guys ultimately, although the process is a drag for me. I mean, I don't really feel like I'm producing a record if somebody says, well, here's the vocal I did, off you go. You know, it's like right. if we're not communicating in the moment of creation, then you're not really directing the movie or producing the record, you know. And so this idea of making it sort of from found objects, like here's a bunch of guitar tracks, turn that into something. I know a lot of people work that way. It's not the way my brain works best as a producer.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. Was there any moments where somebody would send you a vocal or a guitar part and you'd go, this is cool, but can you yes. change this? Can you do something? So there was some back and forth. There was some back and forth,
although again, if it's as you described, if it's just a phone call or an email and then I get another one via the internet, that's again not direct interaction. We did a couple where those guys in California got together and over Zoom or other software, I would at least be able to hear what they were doing and interact, although it's not really listening in an ideal situation with the latency involved, you know, but at least I could have some input in the moment. But again, the logistics of that made it uncomfortable enough that we didn't do too many like that.
Yeah, I've done a couple remote, like live remote mix sessions where I'll share my Pro Tools screen. Yeah. You know, an artist who knows enough about it to have that be a tool to them. But the thing I immediately realized is they're on a 5-second or a half-second delay. So they'll go right there. And I'm like, right there? And then I'm not work. Right there. Yeah. No, it really doesn't. And it works with somebody who's more of a layman. You know, an artist who kind of just is going to listen and say, oh, right before the second chorus, there's a thing. But anybody who wants to point or talk about bar numbers, it doesn't, it falls apart pretty quick.
Yeah. Before I forget, along those lines, it's a bit of a tangent, but I've been using SoundFlow a whole lot more. Have you got into that at all? We talked about it a little in person, but it's this sort of macro app that sits on top of Pro Tools and gives you sort of the ability to string together commands into simple one-button presses.
Yeah, right.
But also people write apps within SoundFlow, and Andrew Sheps has a great app that's just a counter. But, you know, the Pro Tools counter is always counting from the beginning of the session.
Right.
So if you get an email from your client that says, at 32 seconds, there's a guitar note I want to take out. Well, your timeline in Pro Tools probably doesn't know that 32 seconds is the same as his 32 seconds because your song probably doesn't start at 0. What the Sheps counter in SoundFlow lets you do is zero that counter at the beginning of the song, and then it counts.
Oh, great.
In a useful way, and has a kind of an auto-locate where you can go to 30 seconds, boom, it takes you to 30 seconds from the start you've designated. And for the things you're talking about where it's like the layman saying something happens at 32 seconds, it's just a great little
fabulous
tool. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we all have to get around that in one way or another.
Yeah, and I don't like doing math.
No, and also anything that I've figured out is always jury-rigged, right? It's not really it doesn't ever feel like a proper professional way to do it. You're always working around.
Yeah, and this thing's very simple and elegant. You just enter the number, it knows where that is once you've zeroed the top. Yeah.
Going back to producing, you've produced a lot of records, but most of it has been in bands that you are not part or at least not intimately part of the writing process. I mean,
to say the least, yeah.
And with Too Much Joy, I mean, you're presenting ideas just as much as any of the other guys.
Right.
So how is that different for you, being a stalwart producer, but producing something that you are also, like, you're on both sides of the glass, essentially?
Yeah, and that's tricky because on the one hand, they've all agreed I'm the producer, but on the other hand, it's very easy to go, oh yeah, you just think that because that's your vocal part or your bass. It's
Sure.
there's the usual band interaction that you can't get completely around. It's funny,
Right.
we've been talking about it, and I don't know that we have an answer, but I would like, in a way, to find a producer we all could be comfortable with and have somebody else produce a Too Much Joy record. Weird as that might feel for me, I'd like to just sort of be able to, at least as an experiment, say, I'm just going to be another band member here. And, the question there is getting beyond second-guessing at somebody else. It would have to be somebody I can sit back and go, okay, you be the governor.
Sure. Right. You get Roy Thomas Baker to do it. No problem.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting, though, that you would be into that.
I think it would be great. I think it would be kind of interesting and fun rather than trying to jump back and forth between those various hats all the time.
Yeah. Well, and you're still used to working just as an engineer. I mean, there are times where you get hired to just engineer and someone else is producing.
Sure, and just as a player. For example, Stuart Lerman did a track for one of the TV shows that he does music for, and I just played bass on it, which was great fun. I mean, I love just sort of being, I'll just do this instead of trying to do everything all at once. I think you get a lot more out of it in a certain way, trying to not multitask.
Yeah, and you can relax a little bit.
There's also that, yeah.
And you're mixing mostly out of your spot at home now.
Mostly, yeah.
Are you ever going out and going somewhere to mix on a desk?
It's been a while since I've mixed something on a big console. I can't say whether I miss it or not, because probably if I did one, it would remind me what I liked about it. But I'm happy. Sure. I'm happy with the workflow of being able to come back to something, and after I've mixed song number 3, I can bring back up song number 1 and go, well, maybe now what would I do differently? You're a little loath to do that on an analog desk where bringing it back up is a royal pain.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I've never had a recall actually really come back 100% right.
Never.
The thing I love about the digital mixing is you get that great thing where, you used to have somebody show up at the studio at 3:00 and walk in the room and be like, why is the bass so loud? And you go, oh, the bass is too loud. Okay, good. That's great. Fresh pair of ears. You can get that over and over again with Pro Tool. You shut it off, you go away, you hit play again, and you go, well, there's 6 things wrong with this that I can fix immediately.
Yeah. And also, in analog or big desk mixing days, the bane of anyone's existence was, I really loved the mix you did 3 days ago or 3 passes ago or whatever it is, except I like the EQ on the guitar in this one. You know what I mean? That can I take an element from what we're doing now and put it in something we did a week ago or a month ago? And you can do that so easily in the box. It's like that sort of thing. It just eliminates that being a nightmare. It just is like, oh yeah, sure, you want to go back to mix 3? I have mix 3.
Well, and I guess at this point, you gotta, if you're gonna mix on a desk, because it's fun. I mean, I've done a couple things where
it is different.
We went and really said, okay, we're mixing this on the desk, and either leaving it up or saying it's done forever. But you really got to explain and get an artist or a band to buy into that idea and go, look, it's done.
And that gets harder and harder, doesn't it? Everybody and every record label for sure is used to now saying, 3 months later, can I get this one thing? Can I get one with the vocal 2 dB louder or whatever it is?
Yeah, that's
or worse.
That's right.
Or worse, can I put this new vocal into the mix that you did 3 months ago?
I know all about those.
Yeah.
Is there anything else, recent events or otherwise, you wanted to share with the world?
I don't think so. I mean, I do think I did want to mention, I know I mentioned it at the top, but I do write and do the podcasts often for Production Expert. or sometimes called Pro Tools Expert online. That's a website that I would say everybody should have a look at. And maybe listen to the podcast, but I mean, I think it's a great resource anyway, irrespective of my contribution. But if you want to find out what I'm ranting about, that's a good place to go.
And the new Too Much Joy record, All These Fucking Feelings, is awesome and a lot of fun and it was a blast working with you on it. As ever.
Thanks so much for all your help. I mean, I couldn't have done it without you. And you guys, both you and the studio were terrific to us. And
awesome.
I do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks. Good to see you. Hope to see you soon in the real world.
Yeah, likewise. I'll talk to you later.
Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. For links, playlists, and extras for this and all our episodes, visit gearclubpodcast.com and be sure to sign up for the mailing list for the latest news and interviews. Follow us on social media at Gear Club Podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Gear Club Podcast for video versions of all our episodes and more. Gear Club Podcast is sponsored by Eventide, and they're running a special promotion just for Gear Club listeners. You can go to store.eventideaudio.com and use the promo code GearClub15 for 15% off your purchase of Eventide products. Some exclusions may apply. Go to gearclubpodcast.com for details. Big thanks to Eventide for their sponsorship and the special promotion. Gear Club is produced and edited by me, James Frazee, and the mysterious man who shall be known as Jack Frost. Emily Rittenhouse is our marketing manager, and Sarah Worthington is our marketing assistant. Emily Sassmore edits and produces our video content. Our interns for this episode were Samantha Winter and Ryan Kosh.